It's me playing the bassoon. As you can tell, I got the bronze. The other day I was in Lincoln Center conducting one of our more popular ballets. As you can tell, this is a fantasy. As I was waiting for the elevator, a well-known conductor, um, I'll get into that later, about his reputation. But anyway, the door was closing and he was rushing in, and he puts his head between the two doors to keep it from closing on him. And everybody in the elevator looked around at each other, afraid to ask the maestro what the heck he was doing. But I was early for my rehearsal, so I decided to go watch him in his rehearsal for a little while. And before his first downbeat, the youngest member of the orchestra, who looked like a kid who had dropped out of a conservatory in order to take a gig in this famous ensemble. And I'd known a couple when I was at Juilliard who had done similar things. He says, "Excuse me, Mike." He raises his violin bow from he's the last stand, second violin. That doesn't mean he wasn't great, but the others were probably greater, and they're certainly older, more experienced. So he raises his bow, and the maestro recognizes him, and he says, "Excuse me, maestro," because he knew that the maestro liked to be called maestro. It sometimes softened his brusque manner. He was known for being a very exacting, you could say tyrannical master on the podium. He always got great results, especially in his younger years. Nowadays, members of the orchestra have been warned by management if they didn't play well for him, they'd be fired because he was a box office draw even at his advanced age. So anyway, the kid in the back, young man, says, "Maestro, uh, I was in the elevator with you. I'm sure you didn't notice, but I noticed that as you were running to the elevator and the doors were about to close, you put your head between the doors to keep the electric eye from closing the doors on you." I said, "Why did you do that? Never seen that done before." And the conductor says, "Son, he affects a very gentle, jovial, kind of avuncular manner." He says, "Son, as you may know, I am famous for my idiosyncratic and wonderful techniques on the podium. It is less known that I have these wonderful techniques in other realms of my life." And so he continues saying, "I put my head between the doors because I conduct with my hands." There were mild chuckles throughout the orchestra until he stared everyone down individually and they all shut up. Anyway, after the rehearsal, there was a break after an hour or so, and I still had another hour before my rehearsal, and I felt comfortable enough with my score. I had gotten there because I like to feel the ambiance of the building, chat with whoever I see. So I still had plenty of time, and as I was heading towards my rehearsal, I saw this kid, this violinist from the last stand, second violin, talking to the concertmaster. And he said, "I can't follow this guy at all." And the concertmaster said, "Oh, it's very simple. All you have to do is follow his hands when they reach his fifth shirt button. That's the downbeat." Anyway, they continued to disparage the conductor. He has erratic patterns. He can't keep a tempo, especially when working with the ballet dancers. It drives the ballet dancers crazy, but they're too afraid to say anything. And they put down every aspect of conducting. And the young guy starts to get nervous. He says to the concertmaster, "Well, shh, quiet, quiet." He puts his hands to his mouth. He says, "We better cut down on what we're saying, or stop." because I see him coming, and the concertmaster says, don't worry about it. He's also deaf. So it's an old joke that, a riddle rather, what's the difference between a bull and an orchestra? Is that a bull has the ass and back. So this was told to me by a violist in my ensemble, actually, um, who had, I heard him talking one day about his former conductor. He had called the management office one day and asked if he could speak to the maestro. And the secretary said, I'm sorry, the conductor died this morning. The, the guy hangs up, and about 15 minutes later, he calls back, and she says the same thing. This happens throughout the day, and finally she says, she's getting exasperated. You're the viola player who keeps calling back, and I keep telling you can't talk to the conductor. He's dead. Why do you keep calling back? And he says, I keep calling back because every time you tell me that he's dead, it makes me feel so good. Anyway, there are a lot of viola jokes. What do you call a string quartet? It's a cello with a very good violin player, one pretty good violin player, and one violin player who wasn't very good, who had to switch to viola. I personally was a bassoonist. I still play once every 40 years or so. And I always found it, I was pretty good, but I found it impossible to switch to contrabassoon. I had humiliating instances. I guess I eventually got the hang of it after 3 or 4 years of struggling with it. But I remember the first time I was playing contrabassoon was in David Diamond's Fifth Symphony. And he stopped the orchestra at one point and he said, "What's going on with that contrabassoon?" The conductor, who was still very well known, his name I can't remember at the moment, it was the Juilliard Symphony. And he said, "Oh, this is a very good bassoonist. There must be a mechanical problem." So he really stood up for me. That was very nice. But I was still humiliated. Not so humiliated that my arrogance was completely hidden. I went up to Diamond after the rehearsal, and I had never heard of him. I was 17. I guess that's no excuse, but he hadn't entered my musical radar. And so I asked him, Mr. Diamond, do you also teach? Because I like this piece a lot, and I like to write music, and I need a teacher. He said, yes, I teach. And that was the end of that. I did wind up studying with him for a number of years later, but we never discussed that first meeting. I don't know if you remembered, and I don't think I remembered until fairly recently. But my contrabassoon playing got a little better after a while, and the next year I was playing in the Juilliard Orchestra. That was the highest one I had started, the third of the fourth orchestra, third of the four level orchestras. And so there I was playing in the Juilliard Orchestra, and we were playing the Rite of Spring that day. And who was conducting but Leonard Bernstein? And I was playing second contrabassoon. There aren't too many pieces that have two contrabassoons, but I was playing the second contrabassoon. And he never got to a section. He was reheating and rehearsing spots throughout the piece. He wasn't for a performance. It was for just an experience of us playing under his baton. So I guess we could brag someday, like I am now, that I played under Leonard Bernstein. Well, he never got to a part where I got to play one note. So I was complaining to a friend of mine who was the principal viola player, whose name, by coincidence, was Ken. Every time we met in the hallway, we would conduct, and as a bar preparation, and then when we hit the second downbeat, we would say, "Hello, Ken." We thought it was funny at the time. But he said that recently he had gone to a party, and he had parked his car and left his viola in the car. And when he got to the building where the party was, he said, "Oh no, I left the window open." So he runs back to the car, and he looks and he says, "Thank goodness my viola is still there." But to his amazement, there are 4 other violas that other people had thrown in the car. So this viola player who eventually became very good. He was already very good at Juilliard, but became even superb. And he got into the Philharmonic pretty young age. And one day he was giving a master class to the public, actually. I mean, there was public audience. And a kid asked, not the same kid who was the violinist, the arrogant son of a gun, who I talked about a few moments ago, but an even younger kid said, Mr. whatever his last name was, I do remember, but I don't want to bring him into this too directly. He said, Mr. So-and-so, what's the difference between, I know what a viola is, but what's the difference between a violin and a violoncello, or a violoncello? And my friend Ken, in a very serious, he had a great sense of humor, but he pretended to be very serious at this moment. He said, a violin in the winter for people who are bohemians in Paris, such as in that famous opera by Puccini, find that the violoncello is much more useful than the violin. And the kid scratches his head and he says, but why? They're both beautiful. And Ken said, well, a violoncello in the winter is more useful because it burns longer. So he has an orchestra there, my friend Ken, and he's conducting and solo playing in a viola concerto. I'm trying to remember. It was a Baroque composer. Those Baroque composers were kind of weird. I like the viola actually, but viola gets a bad rap. Bassoonists get a bad rap too. As I said, I was a bassoonist, and bassoonists were known appropriately, in my particular case, as the clown of the orchestra. The problem was when I was playing bassoon most, I was depressed most of the time. I only became a jolly old man, past the age of 60 or so. Which reminds me that I still have a little while to grow my beard before I have it shaved off, because I know when to shave it off, because when I meet little kids in the street who don't know me, they tell me what they want for Christmas. So back to this viola master class. He's conducting, and the principal violist in the orchestra that he's conducting stops the rehearsal, interrupts my friend Ken's conducting, and he says, I'm very upset. The oboe player detuned one of my strings. And Ken looks at him perplexedly. He says, well, fix it. And the principal viola of the orchestra says, but I don't know which one it was.